I have a tendency towards outsized emotional reaction. I have a tendency, at least historically, to have unregulated mood. I have a tendency to, in my past but not now, have descended into heavy sugar and alcohol consumption as a balm for stress. Exercise undoes all of that. If I exercise regularly, I come with energy. I'm not irritable. To a point we made about behaviors traveling in packs, I eat right. And if I eat right, I don't experience swings in energy. I'm actually able to contribute to the world at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Hello and welcome to the Optimal Agency Podcast. My name is Patrick Cummings. As always, I'm joined by my friend John Gilson. Together with you, we are exploring the ideas of agency, diving deep to discover a set of guidelines on how each of us can best operate in the day-to-day to maximize our personal autonomy, professional freedom, and ultimately our positive impact on the world. Thank you so much for tuning into the show this week. How are you, John?
I'm a kitty and catnip, Patrick.
We were just joking. I'm waiting for your cat to jump up and make an appearance. We'll see if it happens this episode. Every other week here on the show, we've got a longer discussion on how we can own our lives by becoming optimal agents. That's what we're doing this episode. And then next week, we're going to do a shorter episode where we answer one of your questions. This week, we are embarking on our series of conversations on our 18 behaviors, those actions across health, wealth, and time that most allow us to live by the rules of each one of those categories. We've done episodes on each one of our 18 rules across health, wealth, and time. I'm going to dive into the behaviors that correspond with them. And then we're going to wrap up with a hot take reacting to a post that I found on social media recently about how working less is not laziness. All right. We have, when we've done the episodes with our rules, I like to start with just reading out the rules. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to kind of get into this conversation. So we've got 6 behaviors of the health span enlightened, and these again correspond with our 6 rules of health. Here are the behaviors. Number 1, exercise first. That's what we're going to talk about this week. Number 2, build habits and routines. Number 3, create inviolable boundaries. Number 4, prefer consistency to intensity. Number 5, control your environment. And number 6, correct missteps with next action. So before we get into this conversation about exercising first, I would love to maybe chat briefly about why behaviors. We've got all these rules. We've talked about them. Now we're also introducing all of these behaviors as well. How do they play with each other? Why do we have both sets of these?
Yeah, it's like, hey, Gilson, can I have another list of things to think about? Okay, so we have 6 rules each of health, wealth, and time, and we have 6 behaviors each of health, wealth, and time. The simplest way to think about them is the rules are the what. What do you need to do? And the behaviors are the how. How do you actually create a lifestyle in which you can perform those rules, not flawlessly, but near flawlessly? In other words, what are the frameworks that if you install them in your life, you'll get away with the rules more often than not? You know, maybe a good but not deep analogy for this would be, it's a rule to stop at a stop sign, but it's a behavior to look as far ahead on the road as you can at all times, to have your hands at 10 and 2, to apply even pressure to the brake, right? And to not text and drive. These are all things that will help you stop at stop signs. And so that's essentially what we're doing here. We're now going to say, cool, we gave you a bunch of rules. How do you operationalize them? How do you make them happen in your life?
I've thought more than once as I review the behaviors, I've thought that gosh, if you just focus on the behaviors, you'll almost accidentally stumble your way into the rules. Not every time, not perfectly, but man, if you just focus on the actions and again, the behaviors that we just listed out, and then we've got more for wealth and for time freedom. If you just focus on those and operationalize them to your point and make them the systems by which we operate, again, like you kind of get pretty darn close to following the rules.
Yeah.
You get pretty close to stopping at every stoplight.
One of the heuristics I like is process, not outcome. You know, so if you start to look at our health rules, eat unprocessed food and cook your own meals, build your cardiovascular capacity and muscular strength, don't drink alcohol or eat sugar. Those are outcomes of behaviors and choices you have to make every day. And so if we focus on the process, the outcome happens. Of course, there's one thing there. You do have to have the outcome in mind. when you're doing the process, but you don't have to focus on it. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's talk about exercising first.
Big picture, where do we want to take this conversation about this particular behavior, exercise first?
Yeah. So exercise first can be taken two ways, literally, which is what I meant when I wrote this down, or philosophically. And I'm going to give you permission to take it either way. Frankly, I mean it literally, and I mean it literally for a reason, but I am not looking forward to the volume of emails of excuses as to why people can't exercise first thing in their day. So why do I want you to do it first thing in your day? Literally first thing. Okay. So no other priority, no other demand on your attention will be able to hijack your ability to exercise if it happens first thing in the morning. In other words, if you get up before the kids, if you get up long before the job and you put on your gym shorts and your shoes and your tank top and you go into the gym or you go outside and you get that exercise in, I know it's done. Why do I want to know it's done? Well, if it doesn't get hijacked, it gets done and it gets done consistently. And consistency is the story with exercise and diet and health, frankly. If you want the outcomes of those things, whether aesthetic, whether health related, you have to do them routinely. And so you get results. And so we exercise first thing. The other thing that exercising first thing gives you is an outcome based on the fact that good habits travel in packs. In other words, if you got up this morning and you did 90 minutes of moderate to high intensity cardio with some intervals in there, and you got off the bike or the rower or finished your run, I'm guessing you drank some water. I'm guessing you got hydrated. I'm guessing when you went into the kitchen for breakfast, you weren't like, man, I'm going to have a ring ding for breakfast today, right? Like, what did little Debbie make me? You probably thought about actually refueling your body. How do I get the protein, carbs, and fat I need? Okay. And then you go from there, getting that good nutritional habit. Well, now you've got energy, both nutritionally and from a post-exercise high. You're going to go to work with your cognitive capacity sharpened. And so you're probably going to be less likely to snap at a coworker who says something stupid because your mood's been regulated. You're going to come up with the good idea. You're going to get wealthier, frankly, because you perform better at work, etc. So the idea of exercising first of all, nothing else hijacks it. Second of all, you're going to set off a daily cascade of good behavior. Okay, so now imagine you're the person who says, sorry, bud, can't do it, right? Can't get up before everybody else, or my kid is 2 and there's no, if I wanted to get up before him, I'd actually have to exercise at midnight, right? I can't do it. You can take this philosophically and say, exercise first. In other words, it is your number one priority. And, you know, in some degrees, I think that's redundant. It's just your priority. In other words, don't shoehorn in your workout if you can get to it or when you can get to it, because other things will take precedence, whether it's work, whether it's family life, whether it's emergency, etc. We always want to get in our exercise, at least according to the volume and intensity that we've, had programmed for ourselves. And so treat it as the cornerstone of your day, the thing that doesn't move. And obviously in a lot of our time episodes, Pat, we've talked about time blocking.
Yep. Put
your workout on your calendar. And there's other behaviors we'll get into, like create inviolable boundaries. What does that actually mean? It means nobody gets that time. It's not fungible. You can't move it around. You do it, and you do it first because it's the cornerstone of health. And of course, health is the cornerstone of agency.
Two things that we've talked about previously in the past that feel like worth resurfacing. One we just did last week, which is we talked about nutrition as not something you fit into the cracks of your day, right? It's not something that, I've got 15 minutes. It's something that you think about, that you plan for, that you do everything else around, not the inverse. And it reminds me of a conversation we had months and months ago where we talked about paying yourself first. That's just the principle of paying yourself first. Because if you don't do that, you're not gonna have the space to pay yourself later. It just doesn't happen. We fill the space that we have with whatever it is we fill the space with. And so if we're not able to prioritize exercise, prioritize nutrition, prioritize sleep, the universe, the world is not going to prioritize it for us. And so we are then left with these central elements of agency. We're left giving ourselves leftovers, quite literally. And when we do that, we are, of course, getting leftovers. We're getting slivers. That's not the point of these is not to give ourselves slivers. The point of these is that these are the things that are going to give us everything else we're aiming for.
And we have to overcome a lot of the Puritan work ethic, and we have to overcome quite a bit of the thought that is pervasive that putting yourself first is equivalent to selfishness. Okay, semantically, it is selfishness. That's fine, but we have a moral tinge on selfishness. That moral tinge is if you are concerned with yourself first, you are a bad person. This probably affects parents more than anybody. If you are concerned with yourself more than your kids, you're a bad person. But this affects everyone. If you're concerned with yourself more than this job, you're a bad person. If you're concerned with yourself more than this church community or your community, you're a bad person. That is not true. And it's probably one of the central messages of what we're advocating for here is not individualism in that you're the only thing that matters. It's individualism in priority. You are the first thing that matters. And it's a really, really simple piece of logic. I want you to be as fast and as smart as you can be. I want you to be as bright as you can be. I want you to put an impact on the world. So I want you to have room and space for those really great world-changing ideas. I want you to be a hell of a friend. I want you to be a great lover. I want you to eat correctly, and I want you to enjoy your life. And to do all of those things, we have to take care of the basics of your humanity. And so those are, I have enough money that I'm not concerned about my well-being so that I can feed myself right and clothe my family and house my family. And I'm exercising so that I get all the knock-on effects of exercising. So when I show up for other people, I show up as the best possible version. Okay. Now, that has to be coupled with one more idea, which is minimum effective dose. If I'm going to take care of myself by exercising, but I have a lot of demands on my time, get the minimum effective dose of exercise. You don't spend 2 hours a day in the gym. You can do it in 20. And when it's Saturday and you got some more time, do it in an hour and a half or 2 hours. But find the minimum effective dose of exercise. And we'll talk about what that is here in a minute. Okay. Find the minimum effective dose of good nutrition, right? Of making sure you can sleep so you can take care of. So it's not individualism as selfishness. It's individualism as you are the first priority.
Love that. I'm going to get into some of the practicalities and the how to do this, but perhaps worth a quick few minutes on why does exercise matter? Like just practically speaking. I don't know that we need to make the case for it, but we're going to make the case for it briefly here.
Yeah, I'm not going to make the scientific case for it. You can find that case anywhere you care to. Google the following words: benefits of exercise. They are tremendous. They are multifaceted, and they go way further than you think. So I just want to talk about what they do for me. Okay. Sure. And I don't know if as a listener you get this sense of who I am, but Patrick, I know you know who I am. I have a tendency towards outsized emotional reaction. I have a tendency, at least historically, to have unregulated mood. I have a tendency to, in my past but not now, have descended into heavy sugar and alcohol consumption as a balm for stress. Exercise undoes all of that. If I exercise regularly, I come with energy. I'm not irritable. To a point we made about behaviors traveling in packs, I eat right. And if I eat right, I don't experience swings in energy, and I'm actually able to contribute to the world at 3:00 in the afternoon. And so I find that exercise, again, is this keystone that makes me a better human being. And you can listen, it's going to help with your cardiovascular system, your hormonal balances, your endocrine system, your ability to sleep. It's going to drive your literal physical performance if you care about being an athlete, if you perform at sport, etc. So the list of exercise benefits is huge. But for me, it boils down really simply. Exercise makes me a better person.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Okay, let's get into the how to do this, and I think there are at least a couple buckets we want to talk about. One of them is being proactive, and I would say the other is maybe removing barriers. And so let's start with being proactive. What do we need to do proactively to ensure that we can? And I think maybe we can take this in either one of those directions as to be the literal take here. Like, how do we actually exercise first thing in the morning? I think that's really valuable. Mm-hmm. Caveat, of course, some people can't do it, of course. And if there's room or there's reason to dive into the philosophical, let's do that first. But first thing first is, how do we be proactive such that the first thing in the morning, we can actually get to the garage, the basement, the gym, the road?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So being proactive is a couple of things. It's having everything you need with the least amount of friction. That's the philosophy. Mm-hmm. It's everything I need, least amount of friction. Okay. What does that mean? It might mean laying out your clothes. It might mean having that water bottle ready to go, but that's really the most simplistic level. I think what it means above all is that you have a program and that you know what you're going to do tomorrow before tomorrow comes. You can't figure out what you're doing in the gym when you get to the gym because you're not going to want to. In other words, your motivation needs to be driven not by the fact that it's 5 a.m. and you're a little groggy and you just had a shot of espresso and you didn't sleep that great last night. The motivation has to be external. It has to come from the program. All you need to do is get there. So I need you, first and foremost, to get to the environment in which exercise will happen. It's helpful if that environment is at your house, frankly, or outside your front door. It's less helpful if that environment's far away, but deal with it. Your only job is to get to that environment and to have the programming known when you get there. So if you're alone, that's your programming. If you can, group exercise is a great solution here because you don't have to think about that either. You just have to get where you're going and remove all the friction to that. Make sure there's gas in the car, the shorts are out, right? You've got the socks. And so let's talk about the circumstance a lot of people have found themselves in post-pandemic, which is working out at home, because a lot of people built that gym. If you do not have one at home, get one. If you can even possibly afford it, and there's almost no reason you can't if you are employed, get a home gym. Because a home gym does not need anything other than, in my opinion, a pair of dumbbells and a pull-up bar. If you have those two things, you can exercise. In other words, and probably running shoes. Okay. So you can build your cardiovascular capacity through running. You can build your muscle mass with those dumbbells and that pull-up bar. If you do not have the upper body strength to do bar suspended activity, you'll also need some resistance bands to give you body weight assists. Other than that, it's nice to have a yoga mat so that you can lay it out on the hardwood or wherever you need to exercise. Have a home gym, have a program. Now, if you can't get to group exercise where programming is essentially done for you, the question is, how do you build your own program? Okay. The best thing you can do if you can afford it is probably get a strength and conditioning coach to write it for you. That way you get two things. You get the program, you get accountability, and you don't have to become an expert in programming. But at minimum, your program should contain 4 things, in my opinion. And a lot of them are already in our rules. I need you to have strength training. That's resistance. Okay. Full body resistance. I need you to have a cardiovascular element, row, run, bike, swim. There are others. I need you to have a mobility element. And mobility and stability element. That is essentially being able to take your body through full ranges of motion without losing control of yourself. Okay. Can your ankles bend to the right degree? Can your knees bend? Can you open your hips up? Can you open up your shoulders, etc.? Shortcuts to that. Frankly, yoga is a great shortcut to that. It's something that some folks especially of the male persuasion, will be hesitant to pursue. I haven't gotten more benefit from any mobility routine ever than what I've gotten from the pursuit of yin yoga. Frankly, it's helped more than anything else. So I've got strength, I've got cardio, I've got mobility. The last one's play. Exercise doesn't have to be work. Exercise can be play, right? Go for a hike, get a bike, get a dog, take it for a run, have fun, go play sports, go play some pickup hoop, learn to play pond hockey, and whatever it is, you can get outside, you can get your cardiovascular especially and play sport, and it's good to do that. Okay. So the key is really simple. Don't decide what to do when you get there, because you'll miss one of those elements or you'll be ineffective when you show up. Okay. So there's balances of these things. In essence, you've got 7 days, you've got probably 7 workouts, not really, because you've got to recover. So let's say you have 6 workouts. You should think about mobility as an adjunct to those workouts, not as workouts in and of themselves. And so I want to be doing strength, probably a minimum of 2 and preferably 3 days a week. I want to be doing cardio, a minimum of 2 and preferably 3 days a week. And I want at least 1 day of play.
Anything else under the category of removing barriers? What other barriers? And we've talked about, having this stuff at the house. We've talked about having a program that is an element of removing barriers. Anything else in there that folks kind of, that stymie people on the road to, I got up and now I'm actually working out?
If you can involve your partner. So if you're married, husband or wife, probably should come to this. If you have a live-in partner, they should probably come to this at minimum. Do it with your kid. If you can't do it with your partner, if you don't have kids and you don't have a partner, get a buddy. Okay. Now, why? Simple. There is a dark side of human psychology that emerges when one of you gets fit and eats right and the other one isn't on board. We wish we didn't do this, but there's this phenomenon. I've heard it referred to as tall poppy syndrome, but it's essentially when somebody starts to outpace you at something or be better than you, your first instinct isn't to join them. It's to cut them down to size. And that sucks. And you might look in the mirror and say, that's not me, but it is too. It is too, because, you and Susie were both up for the promotion and she got the vice president nod and you didn't. And were you like, yeah, go Susie? No, no, you weren't. And you weren't. Right. And so the same thing happens with the person you least want it to happen with, the person you love most in the world. Right. So if you can, bring them along with you. Okay. I think that from a barrier standpoint, the other thing to think about is really simple. You need to explain to the people in your life why this is a priority and when it's going to happen, and that you'd like it to be non-negotiable and you'd like to establish that up front. One of the key behaviors, I believe, across anything you want to achieve in life is to establish expectations. This is what's going to happen and when, because people can live with almost any level of change if you tell them what to expect. Where they tend to get irritated is when you don't. When you just wholesale change your behavior, when you all of a sudden are dropping dumbbells don't drop your dumbbells, you don't need to, but you're dropping dumbbells at 5 a.m. That's going to throw a hole in things. Let people know what you're up to.
Love that. Anything else to wrap this conversation up about behavior number 1 of the health span enlightened?
If you haven't tried it, if you've never gotten up and exercised first, it's going to feel like a magic trick for the rest of your life. It's going to feel like the outsized contribution you get from the literal interpretation of this behavior is huge. So give it a shot. And even if you have to move your wake up time back a little bit and your bedtime forward, one of the things that I've noticed in my own behavior is that, listen, evenings seem to, in essence, eventually become screen time. It's so ingrained. We were watching some dumb teenage romance crap for like 2 hours last night, right? And if that's the thing that prevents you from doing this first thing in the morning, it's not worth it. In other words, shut it off, set your alarm, get up that hour earlier. Here's what I do. Okay. Get up, make some coffee, drink it, put some music on in your ears and get to the environment. If you can do those things and the program's waiting for you, you shall succeed.
I do not do the coffee. That's impressive that you take the time to make the coffee. That's great. But I'm just like, I get up, get a splash of water on my face and in my mouth, and then I'm outside to the garage. That's the goal.
Nice. Yeah, good for you.
I reward myself with coffee post-workout.
Rock on. And through what I know about the ingestion of caffeine, that's probably more ideal. This is one of my vices and deficits as a human. If coffee has not entered my bloodstream, no one and nothing exists.
I love it. That was great. And that was a good reminder for me that getting programming outside of my own brain is probably the thing I've been missing for a little while, because I have the excuse of like, I've been doing this for friggin' 20 years now. I don't really need somebody else to do it. And yet the number of times that I walk into the garage and I spend 10 minutes being like, what do I want to do today? And not only do I waste that time, but I'm also less effective because I'm saying, what do I want to do today? Not what am I doing today as it relates to this, 2 week, whatever. So it's a good reminder to me to put a little effort into finding another program or finding a program.
Yeah, go spend that $100.
Totally.
It's worth it, and it will overcome all of your inherent biases that you're not acknowledging.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100. Well, I acknowledge it. I ignore it, but I acknowledge it. I'm a friend. Thank you. If you would like to read all of the behaviors and all the rules, perhaps if you're new to the show, head to optimalagency.co, click on the little tab at the top. You'll get the rules and the behaviors. Again, we've got 18 rules, 18 behaviors across health, wealth, and time. We invite you and we welcome you and we thank you for reading. All right. I wanted to do a quick hot take. Something I came across on social, an individual who I follow and I like. His name is Vizzy Andre. This is on Instagram, Viziandrei. And this is a collaboration he did with somebody else named, his username is Rich Webbs, Richwebz. I'm going to read through this kind of quickly. It's a little bit of a lot, but I'm going to kind of go quick so that we can get the whole context. And here's the post. It's how to work less without getting lucky. Working less is not laziness. Doing less meaningful work is not laziness. Laziness is enduring an existence you dislike. Contrary to popular belief, working quote unquote hard or being quote unquote busy all of the time is also a form of laziness. Lazy strategic thinking and management skills. Working less is harder than working more. Why? You have to focus. You have to build systems. You need discipline. You need to prioritize rest. And when you have to stop trading your time for money, being quote unquote lazy is hard. Working quote unquote hard is easy. The most underrated skill of the 21st century is knowing how to rest and relax. We focus so much on optimizing work to the extent that we ignore the very vehicle that allows us to thrive. Sessions of deep work only take place after sessions of sacred rest. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. No matter how much money you make, how many cars you drive, or how many properties you own, if you can't read a book or take a walk on a random Tuesday at noon without asking for permission, you're not rich. So I would love your thoughts on that.
To me, the answer, first of all, yay. Big round of applause for that. Thank you for the post, and thanks for surfacing this. I'm looking forward to looking a little deeper into it. The concept that immediately pops to mind for me is default scorecards are easy, and so we measure our lives by them. So the default scorecard of how successful are you is how much money do you have. No, it's not. And the authors made the point. It's actually, can you take a walk on Thursday and not feel like the world's going to fall apart, right? That's rich. And obviously you have to have some level of finance to do that. But if you just use money as the scorecard, we see people who do this. And they're miserable. Their life sucks. If money is your raison d'etre, right? Your reason for existence. With work, we tend to use the default scorecard, which is hours of time spent working. I am a worthwhile human being if I work 40 hours. I'm a more worthwhile human being if I work 50 hours. And if I work 60, your admiration and veneration should be pointed in my direction. No. I think about work as not time. I think about it as output. What is it that you've created that's worthwhile, that's impacted the world? And I was having this exact conversation with one of my consulting clients yesterday, who, even though he knows that output is the measure. Output is hard. Output is hard because it is an actual tangible reminder of is what you did worthwhile. But if you use hours, you get to not confront that question because it's not is what I did worthwhile. It's did I do it for X amount of time? And so, yeah, it's a lower bar. Working hard and being busy is a lower bar. I couldn't agree more with what's going on there. And I'd say that if you want to be an optimal agent, what you need to do is define your scorecard. And most of what we're doing here is defining the scorecard differently.
I love that. The default versus the defined scorecard. Do you have any other examples of what we use as default scorecards? And maybe we can look at them across health, wealth, and time. You know, do you have a sense of where we too often default to versus where we should be moving away from, or at least better defining for ourselves?
Yeah. So how about health? How about body fat percentage?
Yep.
Right. So, or muscle mass. Those are default scorecards. Now, we happen to agree with them to a degree, but it's very possible to be very strong and have very low body fat and be completely metabolically deranged. It's also possible to do those things and be using intravenous aids, such as, you know, giving yourself testosterone supplementation or hormonal things that get you completely out of whack. The scorecard, in many cases, needs to not be one thing. It needs to be many things in a melange, right? So if I was to take that example, I'd say, what's your muscle mass? What's your body fat percentage? What are your cholesterol levels? What's the HDL and LDL ratio within that? What's your A1C level? How about your inflammatory markers? How's your C-reactive protein? How about your kidney markers of urea? Like, I tend to say a default scorecard is too simple. It likely has the easiest answer in it and an answer that we respect in it, but not an answer that we respect exclusively in it. So the scorecard is a constellation.
What about wealth? We talked a little bit about that with the default scorecard with this post, but anything else that you feel like is too often the default and not the defined?
Yeah. How much money do you have? What do you drive? How big's your house? Right? Things that absolutely don't matter because they are not actual markers of wealth. So we've talked about this, but wealth is the money you don't spend. Right? No one can see how much money I have that I haven't spent, except maybe my bank officer. Right? You can't see based on my house whether I'm wealthy or not. You can't see based on my car whether I'm wealthy or not. You can't see based on my clothes. This came from TJ Maxx. Like, you can't see based on my clothes how wealthy I am. And it's because the actual scorecard should be multifaceted again. How much is your income relative to your expenses, and how much of the delta between those two things have you managed to save over the entirety of your career? If that was your scorecard, awesome. But if it made you a cheap bastard who never bought anybody anything at Christmas, that's not an adequate scorecard, because now I have to ask myself, is that wealth giving you the life you want? So yeah, unfortunately, scorecards are dashboards, not scorecards.
I love that. All right, my friend. Thank you for that. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. If you haven't yet left us a rating or a review wherever you happen to be listening to this, we would appreciate it. We always appreciate when we see them. Thank you in advance. And John and I will be back next week for another episode of the Optimal Agency Podcast.